The eagle has landed, and it's time for another episode of A Little Off the Top with your host,
Hannah.
and Noah. We have a very special episode today for you all. We just got done with the interview that will be the meat of this episode, and very excited for that. It was a great interview. It was a good time. A lot of great information.
I learned a lot of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll get into that. But this episode is part of a much bigger thing that we got invited to be a part of, and obviously they'll probably see that from the title since it says really big PODCASTHON special in all caps. But we are part of PODCASTHON, which is a worldwide thing that we got invited to be a part of. I don't know where, and have known about it for a while. And we got sick. Both of us got sick, and yada yada yada. And anyway, we're now recording this the week before. So yeah, we don't procrastinate. We don't procrastinate. Anyway, just to give you a little bit of what PODCASTHON is. PODCASTHON.org is about convincing as many hosts as possible to dedicate one episode of their show to a charity of their choice or nonprofit, and to release these episodes simultaneously in a coordinated effort mid-March of this year, which is this week, started on the 15th and runs through the rest of the week, creating a massive and international wave of inspiring audio content. And the objective of this all is to raise awareness for a huge number of charities worldwide. And so we have had the pleasure of being a part of this and highlighting a nonprofit that is part of our home state. So the connection here was kind of a natural connection when we started looking through the nonprofits. I told Hannah about this. She said, that's a really cool opportunity. This is the third edition of it. And the first two involved over 400 French-speaking podcasters. And now they've opened it up to all over the world. That's awesome. So over 1,000 podcasts are a part of this. And when we were looking through the list, we saw that Piedmont Music Therapy was part of it. And we thought, well, that doesn't get a much better match for us in the sense that it's out of the Charlotte area, which is, part of our home state. And music obviously is a huge part of my life, and tangentially Hannah's life as well. And then therapy is something that we've both always been advocates for from the very beginning of when we met each other, and how important therapy is. And so we had the pleasure of interviewing someone from Piedmont Music Therapy. Obviously,
you're getting ready to meet her.
I'll introduce and you'll meet her very soon. But right now we were doing our little intro section. But first, obviously, from the top, I wanted to say that we're very excited to be a part of this. So, Hannah, how you been?
Good. I am now officially done with my work week.
That's
after
right.
Having 2 nights of incredibly rough call.
Yeah.
And I'm glad to be done.
Yes, you're done with your week. I'll be done with my week tomorrow, and well, sort of. I'll be done with my main job, and then I have a gig tomorrow evening. Friday, before this releases on Monday. I should never date these, but I do all the time. I'm bad at that. But hey, you just know that we're current. That's what it is. We don't procrastinate. We just want to keep things current.
That's it.
People are probably wondering, the masses are probably wondering, where is ALOT News? Where is Odd News with Noah? And I just want to say the headlines have been a lot less wacky and a little more sad recently. So that's why Odd News with Noah has not come back in a while. When I get enough odd stories, and some of them probably won't be relevant anymore, I'll come back to it. We'll do some sports talk soon, because guess what's coming up, Hannah? One of my favorite sporting events.
March Madness.
That's right. March Madness. We got to fill out our brackets ASAP. The local radio station is doing a March Madness thing too. So we can both join in on that as well. So that'll be fun. Hannah has beat me 2 of the 3 years that we've done this, even though I did analyzed choices, and she said, I like that mascot or their colors better than 100%. The other. That's because March Madness is madness. It's completely random. And sometimes the teams that are these little schools, they're Cinderella stories. And so, we'll have some more sports talk coming up, because I am going to give week by week coverage of March Madness as that goes on, because Content. Anyway, we're really excited for this episode. It was a great interview. And so let's just get into the meat of this episode. How about that?
Let's do it.
All right. We're gonna sit and talk to the sky. We're gonna sit and talk for a little while. It's time to get to know somebody. Yeah. Well, we are here for the meat of our episode, and we are so excited to have someone here with us. This is, as we talked about in our intro section, this is PODCASTHON. This is our special PODCASTHON episode where we get the opportunity to highlight a nonprofit, and this is being done by podcasts all over the world. And so we have the unique opportunity to speak with someone that neither of us know. This is the first time on the podcast that we have ever had someone that we have never spoken to before. So this will be interesting for sure. But welcome to the podcast, Molli. We are so glad to have you. Can you tell us just a little bit about yourself before we get into the interview?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me too. This is a really cool opportunity. I feel like talking on a podcast has always been something I was intrigued to do. I never thought it would actually happen. So, but yeah, my name is Molli Smith. I am a board certified music therapist, and I work for a nonprofit in Charlotte called Piedmont Music Therapy. We have been around since 2013. I just recently was hired on. I actually did my internship there after completing my coursework and was able to join the team. So that's been really exciting. I've been there for almost 2 years now. So yeah, very excited to speak with you both today.
Yeah. I know that when we just got an email randomly to be part of this thing. And I get all kinds of random emails because the email that we have for this has studio in it, and so people automatically think like, oh, we should do some kind of advertising or blah blah. It's mostly junk. But then I saw this and I thought it was cool, and then I was looking through the list and saw a nonprofit that was not that far from where we call home.
No, you're only about 2 hours away from us. We're up in the mountains, kind of close to Boone. And so when we saw Charlotte, we were like, hey, we know where that's at.
Yeah.
So we were like, well, and then I'm a musician. And so the mix of that and, being not far from home to the state, it's part of the state that we call home and stuff. So we thought, what a better match than that. And so I really hoped that I would get some kind of reply, and then, we all linked up and it all worked out in the long run. So thanks for being patient with us. We both got, we chatted and we had our first initial contact, and then we both got sick separately. And so it just took forever for this interview to finally happen. But we had ideas of grandeur that this was going to happen, like, at the end of January, so that we could, have it banked and ready. And now we're here, and next week is the week of PODCASTHON, and we're doing this on the Thursday that, before the Monday that it comes out. But it's fine. Anyway, let's just get into the episode here, the interview here, our talking points. I kind of sent you a list of things that kind of give you a heads up on mostly what we're going to talk about. So I guess just start out with, what is, I know this is kind of a broad question and we'll try to get closer in, but what is music therapy? How does it differ from just, I don't know, music, people say music's my therapy, but like, what's the difference? Like, get us into that a little bit.
Yeah. So, music therapy is the evidence-based use of music interventions by a credentialed professional to accomplish individualized goals. So you may not necessarily be targeting learning an instrument. Sometimes that's applicable, but mostly we're working on other things like communication, regulation, motor skills, language, managing stress, anxiety, improving memory. And it's very broad.
Yeah,
sure.
And it definitely differs based on who you're working with. So it's definitely super tailored to an individual, what they're needing from you. And it's just a great creative way to do that, to accomplish those goals. I'd say the biggest difference from just listening to music or like playing for yourself, I'd say it's very much interactive. And yeah, there's so many things that you can address in a music space. So
yeah, I've seen some really interesting videos of like I don't know, an Alzheimer patient or something like that, and them getting music played to them from when they were young, and their whole demeanor changes. They light up, or these people, again, someone who's altered mentally, and they'll sit down and they'll go, I don't have any idea how to play this. And then they just play masterfully, and I'm sure that music therapy plays a role in all of that. Obviously I'm coming from a place of, I know bits and pieces from knowing people who went into this field, and stuff like that. But can you explain kind of, I guess, your role? What is your role in some of these things, and what does a day look like for you,
Yeah. So there's a lot that goes into being a music therapist. I feel like people don't really fully grasp everything that we were responsible for. First, you'd start out with an assessment. So you're looking at their responses to different stimuli, maybe different preferences on instruments, looking at their skill levels across the whole wide range: motor, language, cognition, attention. And then from there, you're in charge of treatment planning, coming up with goals and objectives that you want to work on with this person, and then implementing that. And I always say there's always something to learn, always something to improve. Whenever I'm working with a person, whether it's an individual or a group setting, I'm just constantly assessing their reactions to what I'm doing. Are we having like a reciprocal interaction together, or, do I need to match more of what they're giving me? And then documenting, a lot of documentation.
I'm sure.
If you see changes in their affect or behavior, if, they shared a comment of like, oh, this song makes me think of back when I was young, or fond memory. So yeah, it definitely changes day to day. I'd say my week, my days never really look the same.
Sure.
Especially working within a private practice, I feel like that comes with a lot of unknown, a lot of flexibility. And, there's a lot of ebb and flow. Sometimes we only do like a short week series. If it's a group in the community, we might only see them for 4 weeks or 8 weeks. But yeah, typically it's assessing if I have new patients coming in, lots of planning and documentation for sure.
Yeah. What ended up inspiring you to become a music therapist? Because I'm sure that was a lot of schooling and a lot of hard work, and it's not something that you just woke up one day and was like, hey, this is what I want to do. What was your path?
Yeah, so growing up, I was always into music. I took piano lessons, and it was just always like a comfort space for me. And so I always knew that I wanted to do something within music, but I did not want to be a music teacher. I knew like performing as a musician wasn't always a steady thing. So actually in 10th grade, we had some counselors come in, our guidance counselors, to do like a career exploration kind of activity. And I just logged on to my laptop and I was searching for other careers in music, and music therapy popped up. I was like, whoa, what is this? I mean, this sounds just right up my alley. Being able to use music to help others has always been, I don't know, super, like a big passion of mine. And I feel like after that day, I was just mesmerized. And after doing some more research, it just felt like the right fit for me.
Yeah.
As I went into college, I still felt a little unprepared. You know, I had a general understanding of what it was, but not fully. And I was just hoping that it would click. And thankfully it did. I got to observe a session my freshman year and just seeing it in action. It was so cool. And yeah, just
That's
having
so cool.
that. Yeah.
So what kind of training or qualifications comes with becoming a music therapist?
Yeah. So you have to have a bachelor's degree or higher in music therapy. And that is received from a approved program by the American Music Therapy Association, or AMTA for short. You also have to have 1,200 clinical hours.
Wow.
And that is in combination of your clinical training as a practicum student, and then typically a 6-month internship following your coursework completion. And then after all that, you are eligible to sit for the board exam, and that is administered by the Certification Board for Music Therapists, CBMT. And then you can use the credential, MTBC, Music Therapist Board Certified, and begin practicing as a professional. And then from there, your learning continues, maintaining continuing education credits. You have to have 100 credit hours every 5 years.
Wow.
So you recertify that. Yeah.
So where in North Carolina do they offer those programs? Where did you graduate from a school in North Carolina, I guess I should ask?
Yes, I went to Queen's University of Charlotte.
Okay, yeah.
Appalachian State also has a music therapy program.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Let's see. I know toward the south you have Converse College and Charleston Southern University.
Okay. Yeah.
They both offer music therapy programs.
Cool.
But I'd say it's probably more widespread in other parts of the country.
Sure.
I'm thinking especially like Midwest, up north.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are some options.
That's cool.
For sure.
That is cool. I didn't major in music or anything like that, but in college I was around a lot of music majors because I was in the band. I was in a couple of different ensembles and stuff like that. And so and then I knew some people from other schools, and where I'm not from North Carolina. I'm from Louisiana, and that was not really much of an option at any of the schools in Louisiana as of yet. And I think it's a growing, thing type of situation. But I've always found it to be incredibly interesting. And, for me, music came from a place of, I grew up, my grandpa was a very talented musician. And so, from there, then I got involved with music in the church, and kind of like you said, where you're always learning. I went to seminary, and for that, you get a degree, and I got my degree in music, not music, in ministry leadership. So I got a master's in ministry leadership from there. And in that, you think, all right, I'm ready. And then you actually start doing work in the church, and you're nowhere close to ready. There's all the things that happen actually on hand. And I know Hannah kind of has talked about that before too, in her field, that there are definitely moments of, we didn't learn about this. Is there anything and this is kind of off script, but is there anything that you can think of immediately that comes to mind of a moment like that where you were like, oh man, I didn't learn about this, you know?
Yeah, I definitely feel like I did majority of my learning during internship because you're just like thrown right into the mix. And
Yeah.
I think that really taught me how to be super flexible. You know, as a college student, I always wanted to do everything by the book, you know, write out my treatment plan or session plan to a T. And in the real world, I mean, yes, you have a plan, but sometimes you have to throw the plan out the window. And so that's what I think of just coming into a session, if it's with a person, maybe with a diagnosis you haven't worked with before, or just, you know, something goes wrong or not what you thought would happen, and just thinking on your feet. And you're like, how can I pivot this in the moment and do what's best for everybody? So yeah, I think those firsthand experiences really teach you a lot.
Absolutely. Can you think of throughout your, you know, your time as an internship and your couple of years here with Piedmont, you know, do you have any specific that you can share, like big success stories or experiences where you're just like, there was a real breakthrough, I guess you could say? You have any specific stories there?
Yeah, I was trying to gather some thoughts too. I will share, I had a 4-year-old with autism, and this was like my first client that I assessed on my own as freshly certified. And he was super resistant, you know, saying no to everything, very minimally engaged, hard to keep him in the room. And it was a lot coming into it. First time go around, I was like,
sure.
Okay. But I've been working with him for over a year now, and he will come into the clinic and be like, hey, Miss Molly, and he'll just like run straight into the room. We've developed a really great rapport, and in doing so, I've seen him really just grow in so many areas. We've been working on language, so expressing his wants. Previously, he didn't really verbalize as much with me. Now he can say, okay, now I want shakers, or now I want to do our question song. So seeing that growth is really, really great. And just seeing how attentive he is now. He can engage in tasks for longer periods of time. He's been super receptive to taking turns with me, sharing materials. So that's one example, but I feel like there's so many little things that you can really focus on that just can make your whole day. As you mentioned earlier, of videos you've seen with people with Alzheimer's, I actually work a lot with people in memory care. And just seeing their change in demeanor is one of the most rewarding things. You know, walking to a room and they're all sitting by themselves, not socializing at all. And then the second you start playing the first song and they're all like smile, singing along with you, and just being able to foster those connections. It just makes everything worth it. And yeah, those little moments are really important and special.
That's awesome.
That is awesome. It kind of makes me think about So before I went to seminary, so I got my bachelor's degree in behavioral sciences, and then I did a post-bachelor's program in education. And when I was doing that and doing, I was going to do physical education and special education. And so, doing the, what did we call them? Basically your version of clinical hours, where we were, in the classroom with teachers.
Okay.
Observation hours, I think is what we called it. But anyway, one of the things I did, obviously the cross section of those is adaptive physical education. So working with, special needs students and stuff like that. And I remember my first day with this guy in the area is kind of rural area. So he traveled to multiple schools. So I traveled with him to multiple schools, and we would meet up at each school. And the first one we came to was at an elementary school. And he tells me, he says, okay, so before we go in, I should let you know that this student has a history of biting, of grabbing and pulling, and also watch out because she likes to put her hands in her pants.
Oh.
And I'm like, great. I'm like, this is my first thing into this, this whole thing. And I'm like, oh man, and she did not like me being there at first because I was a new person. She did not know who I was. Like, you
were breaking up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But by the end of the semester, she knew who I was and was sad that I was leaving, so it's like, it's the little things that you see over time, the connections that you make and all those types of things is what makes the really challenging moments worth it,
Exactly. And that just made me think too, like something you may think was insignificant can be so major for them.
Yeah.
I've had people tell me things or like reference something that we did, and I was like, oh, you remember that? Or wow, that really impacted you.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
Yeah, absolutely. The I think the big thing in any career, and I think Hannah can attest to this too, is the just to be intentional and in the moment with that person.
Yeah.
It makes the difference of any other interaction they have throughout their day.
Yep.
Yes.
So with the, success stories, challenges, all those types of things, maybe give us an idea of maybe what some techniques or approaches or things like that, what do those look like in a typical session? Obviously there's no typical session, but still,
So yeah, there are different types of techniques. They kind of fall under different categories. You have like receptive, so that's more like music listening or relaxation. You have like creative, which could be like, I want to make sure you all can
Sure, absolutely.
Let me reference notes because I don't want to misspeak. It's been a while since I used all these technical terms.
It's okay. People hear me misspeak all the time on this podcast, so and I Google things very often. So, and I am no expert in anything, so it's okay.
It's like the second I look at them, I'm gonna be like, oh yeah.
I totally understand. It's hard when you're on the spot. It really is.
That's like anytime I get to work with a student, they'll just randomly ask me a question, and it's something that I have not thought about since I graduated school.
Yeah, exactly.
10 years ago.
You finish school and you're like,
and I'm just like, sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So yes.
Whatever you say.
So as I said, there's receptive music therapy, which involves music listening or guided relaxation. There's active, which involves lots of things: improvisation, playing instruments, movement and music, drumming, things where you're actively engaging. And then there's creative, which can come into form with songwriting or music composition. And obviously this can definitely differ based on who you're working with. But
Sure.
I'd say I've definitely used any or all of these. in certain scenarios. I will say probably my most use would be like active play, playing instruments. I love songwriting too. It's always fun to do in a group. Yeah, I think those are my most used, I'd say.
Okay. So from there,
how do you go about choosing the type of music or activity for a client? I know that's probably part of the like screening process and going through all of that, but what are some markers that you look for that kind of help point you in the direction of the treatment that you go through?
Yeah, I'd say the most important thing is to stay goal-oriented. Mm-hmm. I always want to think first, what am I trying to accomplish here? And how can the music that I pick support that? So always having that goal in mind first is very helpful. Using preferred music is a great way to really connect with your client, particularly with older adults in memory care. We want to use the music that they're most familiar with, which would be like songs of their teenage years or 20s. So always keeping that in mind too. Because, you know, if you think of yourself as a person listening to your music, you know, you have your preferences, things you definitely don't like. Yeah. And maybe different songs for different moods. But anyway, using preferred music. If I'm also stuck on like, how can I address this? I always lean on my coworkers too. A lot of times they have really great ideas, especially for those who have been in the field longer.
Yeah.
I may often seek out advice from other professionals, especially if, let's say, I'm working with a child who also has a speech therapist or occupational therapist. Sometimes there's a chance to collaborate on like, okay, if you're working on this in your sessions, maybe I can also incorporate that in a way. Even talking with family caregivers can be a great outlook. And then turning back to your research. Sometimes I'm like, okay, let me go to the site. There's so many sites with like intervention ideas that I will often use if I'm really in a place where like, okay, I don't really know what to do next. So those are all great tools. And I feel like the biggest thing is just trying things.
Right.
A lot of it is trial and error. You're gonna just see what works best.
Yeah.
Right. You know, and you're newer to the field in a sense, but what are some of the biggest challenges you have faced so far as you grow as a music therapist?
Yeah. I think my biggest challenge personally is like battling with myself. Being a newer professional, you know, I'm still figuring out things and there's always going to be something to learn.
Yeah.
And so I think giving myself grace in that sense. Yeah. I feel like a lot of times I worry, you know, if I'm doing enough for this person, am I making the right decisions for them? Or wondering if what I'm doing is actually making an impact.
Sure.
Are these skills and behaviors able to carry over in different settings? So I try to give myself grace. And I will say hearing positive feedback from parents and caregivers and clients themselves like make the world of difference. And I'd say another huge challenge, and just in the field in general, is constantly having to advocate for what you do. And while I I think advocacy is super important, and that's only how we're going to keep growing. It can be tiring sometimes, especially if you're talking to a person who just does not understand,
Right.
or even, if you've been working with their loved one for a long time and they still don't understand what you do, or diminishing all of the work that goes into it. So that's, I think those are my big two challenges for sure.
Yeah, anytime you are dealing with the general public, especially when you're just getting started and you're doing something where you're what you're a part of is such a big part of their life, it is so easy to second guess yourself. I know there's been times where I'm like, am I doing my job right? Am I making sure that, because I'm an X-ray CT tech, like am I giving the radiologist everything that they need? Like, is there something I could be doing better? Am I doing right by my patients? Am I advocating for them correctly?
Yeah.
And I will say, as you get a little bit more experience and stuff, there's almost like I know what I'm doing. I can do this. And then once you kind of get to that point, it's like, yes, you're still learning, because you're never, ever, ever, ever going to know it all, because there's so much going on. But once you get to that point and you feel that confidence in yourself, it makes even more of a difference to the people that you're affecting, because someone comes in, for instance, and they're terrified of what they're going to have done with me, because they're afraid it's going to be a cancer diagnosis, or they're afraid that this is going on. And being able to get on their level and explain what I'm doing, what we're going to be able to see, all of the different ways that this is the best thing for them, and just walking them through it with that confidence, it makes a total difference, because all of a sudden it clicks and they're like, oh, she does know what she's doing. She does, she's going to get the best scan for me, or she's going to get the best whatever. And then at the end, it's like, yeah, they're still anxious about their results, but I know that I got what I needed. And I don't know, just having that confidence, it's incredibly hard. Like, I've been doing it for almost 11 years, and there's still days I'm like, I don't feel like I know what I'm doing. But I think you'll learn as you get, more years under your belt, that you're like, hey, me compared to me 3 years ago, 4 years ago, is a completely different person. And I think that's such a cool experience when you're working with people and you get to see that growth in yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even thinking of starting out fresh as an intern, I feel like I've just grown so much, and being able to trust your gut. And even talking with some of my coworkers too. One of my coworkers brought up the fact that you are worrying about, wanting to provide the best services for your clients just shows how much you actually care about what you're doing.
Yeah.
And, some people don't. So, a lot of growth in that sense.
And when I think about advocating, like on a personal level for myself, I can think of, people come from this mentality, being in ministry is very different than a lot of fields and a lot of, whatever. And I don't actively work in ministry right now. Well, I do, in a sense that we travel for her work. She's a traveling X-ray tech, and I pick up odd jobs wherever we go. I play gigs, and then I help out at whatever church we're at, basically, and just do what I can. But, even when I was going to seminary, and I said, they're like, oh, so you're going to seminary and you're going to, what do you, and I had a job. I worked part-time at a church at the time, and I was the worship director. And I said, I feel called to be like a worship and discipleship pastor. And I had multiple people say to me, oh, I thought you were going to be a real pastor. And it was like, oh, yeah, a real pastor. And what they think is the only real pastor is the one who preaches on Sunday. But especially whenever you get into a place where there's more than just 25 people at a church or something like that, you've got to spread yourself. And if you want to have more ministries, you've got to spread out. Otherwise, you do what I've seen a million times is you got one guy trying to run everything and he gets burnt out and he quits, and then the church scrambles and they don't. I mean, it happened to my church when I was young. So, it's that idea that I had to explain to them that no, that's a real pastor. It's a real thing, like that. These are we're trying to grow in ministry. And, and the same thing with you. I'm sure you've had people who have come to you and been like, you're going to be a therapist, so you're going to do this. And you're like, well, I do it with music. And they're like, oh, I thought you were, you know what I mean? And I'm sure, I can only imagine, the ignorance of people sometimes that, it's to explain to them, this is a real thing. This is, this is very much a real thing. We're not just having fun here,
Yes.
like, so, I guess, talking about challenges and things like that, maybe on a more personal level with a client or, how do you handle resistance or maybe a lack of engagement in those sessions?
Yeah. So, I would say I am a very patient person. And, so I always approach it in that sense. If I get some resistance, I'm just gonna give them a pause, and like I said previously, constantly assessing in the moment, is a huge part of that. Maybe it's the way I'm playing the song, or maybe the blinds are open and they're distracted. There can be so many elements to a person's level of engagement that you may not think of firsthand. So if someone is being super resistant, I always just try to give them a little space, some patience, always trying to meet them where they're at. If they need a second to just take a few deep breaths, or if we just need to do something else entirely. And then as far as engagement, a lot of times people just need some repetition or a longer time to process what you're asking them to do. And so I usually don't give something up right away if they're not immediately engaged. I will typically try it a couple more times, see if there's a difference, and then reassess and go from there. Because a lot of times it may just be that they had a super rough day.
Yeah.
And, that's affecting their regulation or their ability to focus. So I try to be objective in that moment, like what little things I can change and see if there's a difference. But just trying to be flexible.
How is, I'm sure that there are a lot of research and studies and all of this stuff, all of this new information that keeps coming at you. Because I know in the field of radiography or radiology in general, it's constantly changing. It's constantly moving. We're constantly getting new equipment. And I know that you do the continuing education just like we do. What is your biggest way that you stay informed about the latest research? Because I know that field is probably just blowing up and growing, and there's constantly new information coming at you.
Yes, there is a ton of research. And music therapy started out in the 40s. And so since then, there's just so much that's been developed. Like you said, constantly new things coming out. There are two big publications in music therapy. There's the Journal of Music Therapy and Music Therapy Perspectives. So those are great resources if I'm ever interested in looking through articles to stay more up to date. But I feel like the most easy way is through continuing education. A lot of people will present their own research that they've done.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really interesting to hear about. I am also always, if there's a new diagnosis I have not worked with yet, I will typically look into the literature, see if there's any interventions that worked well, maybe things to avoid or just characteristics. But yeah, it's hard to stay up to date when there's so much out there to keep track of. And actually at PMT, we have weekly staff meetings, and they're all, we have like rotating themes. And one of them is research. So getting in that at least once a month, where we can either look at research articles or even just reviewing terms, like research terms. And I've also been able to participate in some research studies, which have been super cool.
Yeah.
I did one in undergrad with a professor, and I also conducted one of my own research studies, like as a student. And then I was able to participate in one that we just completed with Gretchen, our executive director, and a professional from, I want to get the university right. It's Georgia State College and University. Does that sound right? If you're familiar with Georgia.
Not really.
I mean, I only know like UGA and Georgia Tech for the most part.
Georgia College and State University. That's what it is.
Oh, okay. That feels like a redundant name.
So we are in the midst of wrapping up. We did a research study on supervision and music therapy, especially in private practice, and how professionals are utilizing supervision and what methods are currently present. So
that's cool.
Definitely being involved in research too gives you a whole other appreciation, because it is a lot of work.
Yeah.
And I'm just fascinated by people who devote their whole careers to it. It's just amazing.
Yeah, I'm definitely not one of those people, but I'm glad that they exist.
Sure.
It definitely takes a different type of brain power.
It does. And a different way of thinking about stuff.
Yeah.
So let's spin it just a little bit. How does music therapy vary across different environments? I know your private practice, but like, for instance, if you're going to a hospital or into a school or a nursing home, how does that transfer? Like, what does it look like in different settings? Because I'm sure that's very different than just like an in-office, all of the different environments.
Yeah. I will say, I feel like the biggest difference is the environment and maybe the types of goals that you're working on.
Mm-hmm.
If I think of going into a hospital, that may be a little more chaotic than, just sitting in one office space. You may only see one patient one time. Whereas like in a private practice, you have more opportunity to see someone over a longer stay. I have not had as much experience, I'd say, with like working in another setting. So I can't attest to like what a day-to-day would be.
Sure.
But I have had experience going out in schools and assisted living.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, a lot of times it's getting the environment ready for your services. I've done a lot of groups in memory care units, and a lot of times you have to rearrange the group to make it more of a welcoming space so that everyone can see you. And, sometimes that's not an option. So you have to like work with what, you have. And yeah, I'd say there's been times when I was in a session and we were in like the room where they eat lunch. And so it was like directly attached to the kitchen. There's like a little kitchenette in the back, and had a staff member using a blender. And it was like, wow.
Yeah.
I've never had to deal with this. So there's a lot of different factors. I feel like, your techniques and your approaches definitely stay the same, your foundations within your music therapy practice. But yeah, just dealing with those environmental factors that you may not expect, I guess.
A lot of thinking on your feet.
Yes, for sure.
So we don't want to keep you for too much longer,
Okay.
take out of your evening for too much longer. But, what would be some advice if someone's interested in getting into the field, or, what would be some advice for them to get started? What do you think, what would, if you were talking to your younger self getting involved, what would you say to them?
I would definitely start with just doing some research, exploring different pages. I wanted to share too. There's the American Music Therapy Association website. It's musictherapy.org.
Okay.
It can be a little tedious to click through, but they've got great information on there for anyone interested in learning about music therapy and also how to become a music therapist. You can search for accredited programs on there. It's also a great tool if you're looking for an internship at that stage to find national roster internships through that resource. But yeah, I would say doing research, and I think just being prepared for everything that comes with it. I mean, there's a lot to it that people don't know. And yeah, you have to be super motivated for sure. It can be a lot of work. So I think if you're super passionate, really holding on to that and cherishing those success stories. And yeah, thankfully at Queen's University, I was able to start clinicals right away freshman year. I know that's not always the case for people, but I think definitely getting that hands-on experience can be super helpful, not only as your growth, but also as you figure out if this is actually the career path for you, if you actually enjoy it, being able to take what you're learning in class and apply it. I thought that was one of the most rewarding, but yeah, it helped me a lot as a student and my growth in that area.
For someone who is going into this, it definitely takes a special type of person for sure. So what are some skills that you think are essential for a person getting into that? Not even necessarily what they're going to learn, but like just as a person, what are some things that you've learned, like, oh, it's a good thing I'm this way, going into this field?
Yeah, I would definitely say being organized goes a long way. I definitely feel like having patience and caring for others, being able to show someone kindness and giving everybody, equal opportunities. I definitely feel like you have to be able to connect with so many different people, understanding your own biases and how that may impact your work. So I feel like being self-aware too. And then I also think just being willing to learn and grow as a person and as a professional.
Being teachable is everything.
Yeah, absolutely. So if, we would be remiss to not highlight, your practice. I mean, that's kind of the whole point of this. So again, tell us a little bit about where you work, how, if somebody's in that area, how they could, reach out to you guys, all that type of stuff.
Yeah. So again, I work for Piedmont Music Therapy. We started in 2013 and we just recently became a nonprofit. So that's been super exciting.
Yeah.
We have a clinic in Charlotte. It's right off of Westinghouse Boulevard. So if you think Carowinds, it's kind of like right across from there. So we have individual sessions at our clinic. We also teach lessons. So if anyone's interested in learning an instrument, we have traditional and adapted lessons for anyone who is interested in that route. We also do a lot of work in the community. Gretchen always says, like, bulk of our work is going out to different sites. So we have several partnerships in both North and South Carolina, since we're like right on the border.
Sure.
So we get to serve a lot of different communities, which is super exciting. A lot of times we will work with the Arts and Science Council of Charlotte to fund programs, maybe a short week series. We currently have one going on now. It's called Community Grooves, and it's free for the public. So we have different ages, groups for people to come and explore music therapy, music making, and I feel like we've been able to reach more people that way.
Yeah.
A lot of times we'll have people start out in a community group and then they come in to do individual sessions. So that's really exciting. But yes, you can look us up online at PiedmontMusicTherapy.com. We are also active on Instagram, Piedmont Music Therapy, and Facebook as well. And if anyone is interested, going to our website, you can subscribe to our newsletter. We update that every month with new things going on, and yeah, it's very exciting.
That's awesome.
Awesome. What I'm just curious, what instruments do you play, or instrument do you play?
So I started out with piano. I'd say that's probably my primary instrument, but I feel like I lean more into guitar in sessions just because it's oftentimes more portable if you're running around and stuff. So those are my main two, piano and guitar. And I sing, obviously. Gretchen also plays viola.
Oh, cool.
We have another coworker. Her name is Gabby. She plays the trombone.
Wow.
Nice.
So yeah, we've got a good variety amongst us.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd say piano and guitar are typically most used.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We normally have an incredibly ridiculous question that we end interviews with people on.
Okay.
I won't submit you to that. How do you sign off on an email? Let's just do that. That's a much lighter one. Typically, I'll just tell you what we typically do. We typically get people, because we know them and we're okay to subjecting this to this, but we get them to give us their best impression of a hot dog man at a stadium. So like their best hot dog man call is what we typically end the interview with, but we won't subject you to that. So just give us your best sign off on an email and we'll just end it that way.
Is this a sign off on like a professional email?
Any email you want. Personal, just give your best sign off.
All right.
I know
so
it's on
many
the
things
spot
to say.
Yeah.
I usually end with Best.
Best. Well,
Simple, straight to the point.
That's right.
We like it.
well, you know what, Molly? Best. And this has been another episode of A Little Off the Top with your hosts,
Hannah
and Noah, and our special guest, Molly. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, Molly, of course, for joining us. And if you enjoyed it, rate us 5 stars, all that good stuff. If they didn't enjoy it, what do they do, Hannah?
You just ignore it.
That's right. There's a million other podcasts. Move on. I mean, rate us 5 stars still and share it with someone you think that may like it. But anyway, that is another episode of A Little Off the Top. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.